This is Regenerative Skills, the podcast helping you to learn the skills and solutions to create an abundant and connected future. I'm your host, Oliver Gaucher. New Society Publishers is your one-stop shop to level up your skills. These episodes are a great way to get a preview of the fascinating subjects and knowledge from my guests, but if you want to build a deeper understanding and practical skills that will serve you on your regenerative journey, then you should check out their titles, like Coppice Agroforestry, The Book of Nature Connection, Practical No-Till Farming, Wild Plant Culture, and so many more. They've got audio, digital, and hard copy books so that you can choose your favorite format. Find it all now at newsociety.com. Hey there everybody and welcome back. So today's episode touches on a very timely topic for me. I'm currently developing a program to assist European farmers in their transition to regenerative management of their farms. And the big challenge for me is to make a program that's relevant for the vast array of contexts and differences that farmers across this continent are working from. No single set of information is appropriate. No one teaching style is going to connect with everyone. Even the regulatory framework and incentive structures can vary a whole lot. I've long since observed this as an obstacle for design frameworks like permaculture, which have a solid foundation in the principles and the patterns of nature, but often get lost in the details and techniques like swales and chicken tractors or herb spirals. I'm of the opinion that we're all overwhelmed with information and possibilities in our bizarre, internet-connected, anthropogenic world, and more options and information often only serve to make choosing and taking action tougher. I believe that simple and reliable processes and organizational support can have a much bigger role to play in helping us to set priorities, put parameters on our options, and to make the overwhelm more manageable, especially when it comes to the complexities and the timescales of working with living systems. Luckily for me, one of my friends and respected colleagues in the permaculture space has just developed a course and accompanying tools to assist precisely in this area. William Horvath is the founder of Permaculture Apprentice. He studied permaculture in Australia before quitting his job as a geologist for the mining industry there, and moved with his wife back to Croatia, where he's originally from. For years now, he's been developing his own permaculture paradise and writing and educating about his experiences on his blog and through his design and consulting services through permacultureapprentice.com. He has also begun teaching permaculture courses for people looking to start their own farms and transition to a regenerative lifestyle. Now in today's session, we pick apart the common hurdles that lead to inaction and paralysis despite having all the knowledge and information that we may need. We talk about the common problem of having lofty goals, many projects going on at once, and of course, limited time and resources to do them. From there, we go deep into defining the what, where, and how of your goals in order to build them into a process. And William talks about how to break them down into manageable chunks from there through phases and steps of development. And he also goes into sharing tools and advice for keeping everything organized and scheduled in calendars and to-do lists so that you never miss essential windows again. Now, I really want to express just how important that I believe this piece of the puzzle is for all of us in reaching our goals. I know from my own experience how much getting organized, building routines, planning ahead in detail, and creating loops of experimentation, monitoring, and revision have all been essential in my own life and in my success with clients and in business. Now, though I've come a long way personally, I still have a lot of learning in this area to do, and doubling down on preparation and planning has always paid dividends for myself and for those who I know who excel in their chosen fields. Quickly, before we get started, I also recommend that you go over to the links in the show notes where William has given exclusive access to some of the tools and templates that feature in his course in order to get you started. And of course, if any of you want to stay up on the development of the transition program that I'm building for climate farmers, the beta program will be available for members of the Climate Farmers community this fall, and you can sign up now on our website at climatefarmers.org. So with all of that out of the way now, let's hear from William Horvath. So William, welcome back. Man, it's been way too long since we talked. You were the first guest on this podcast back when it was called Abundant Edge, and I was coming up with the concept. We had some follow-up interviews after that, but you and I really haven't chatted directly in a number of years. That being said, you have been up to a lot. You've got your online business, the Permaculture Apprentice, some new programs coming out. And I mean, this is really timely because you've got a lot going on. You're juggling a lot of different projects. You're a father. You've got multiple properties. You've got an online business. And you and I are in a similar situation in that we're just juggling a lot of different things. We're trying to develop our land. We're trying to develop our businesses, still maintain time and connection with community and family. And we got to manage that time better. And this is exactly what you're working on. Maybe give me a little update on where you're at right now and some of the things that you're working on.
Okay, so to first, thanks for the welcome, and I'm honored to be back. It has been like 5 years, and in 5 years, well, I became a father. That was like the biggest change, and that influenced so many things that I was doing, because then there was always they say that it's not like that you have work-life balance, you have like work-life choices. Okay, so there were a lot of choices that I made that put let's say a strain on my time that I have to devote to business and to the farm and to everything else. So I'm always juggling those things, and I'm always trying to be as productive as I can. And that's why in the, I don't know, I would say in the last 3-4 years, as I was teaching permaculture and I was helping people with their properties, I increasingly developed tools that I was using in my own life, and then I was giving that to people consuming my content. And that was like the big thing that I had was always, the biggest constraint was always on my time, and then as well as the resources that I didn't have. Okay, so I always kind of, the biggest challenge is always you either don't have time, or you don't have resources, or you don't have the energy, and you control the skills and knowledge as well. So there are certain, I'm in the phase where I don't have time. I have some resources and I have skills, but the time is always an issue. So I've been working in the last, I don't know, 3-4 years on trying to be as effective as possible and as efficient as possible with everything that I'm doing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And in a similar situation with just all the projects that are going on, something that I mentioned in a previous episode of the stuff that I'm juggling, and having to allocate time carefully, but also make sure that I'm focused and that there's a good plan and organization behind the use of that time so that it is used effectively and actually opens up opportunities to do what I want to be doing or need to be doing with the time left over. And I think you, like me, have pretty big goals and visions for the future, things that we want to accomplish. And that's also very common of the people within your online network that take your courses, as well as the people who listen to this podcast. Many of us are driven by these bigger visions, and yet that can also be crippling for our decisions because they are so large and they're hard to break down into tasks that you can accomplish on a daily basis and manageable goals in between getting to that bigger vision. How is that something that you started to manage in your case?
Well, I would say that that being overwhelmed is definitely something that a lot of people can relate to, because we all have, as I said, we're kind of motivated with everything and doing what we want to do. We have big expectations, and then we have goals, but then we get overwhelmed with everything that we want to do, could do, need to do, and are doing. Okay, so what I've done is when we are thinking about the whole system, like the property that you're managing, whether that's a farm, whether that's a homestead, the first thing that I recommend to do, or the way that I'm thinking about it, is to look at that whole system and then break it down to multiple components, like a bigger subsystems that you are managing. Like, I can give you an example. Like, an example would be if you have, let's say, a homestead, or if you have a farm. And that farm would be, the systems on that farm would be food forest, it would be your garden, it would be fertility or soil management, it could be energy, plant propagation, infrastructure, water. So they are all interconnected when you look at them, because on a permaculture farm or regenerative agriculture farm, all these systems are interconnected and you want them to be interconnected. But from the perspective of farm management, you can look at them separately. And once you look at them separately, then you can start to manage the projects and the task within them, utilizing a framework for management and tasks and tools for project and planning. And that would be like the first step. And then within each system, you can then break it down further into what I call, I have a frame for that, and I call that the trident of getting things done on the property, which comes down to what, when, and how. Okay, so the what is the big picture or plan, or you can call it the roadmap of what you're trying to achieve, and it's with phases and steps. Then you have when is the calendar of events of when the things are from that roadmap are happening across the year, and then you have the how, and how is the step-by-step on how you execute the task. That's the logistical part and the how-to. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I can go then.
Absolutely. And I like that you're using the example that a lot of people can connect with that are interested in permaculture or regenerative farming, something like a food forest or an orchard in some cases, right? So let's break that down even further and look at some of the components of planning and organizing for the design and implementation of a food forest.
Okay, so let me run you through the framework of the trident of getting things done. So the what, the when, and how. Let's start with the what. Okay, so the what is all about being effective. Okay, that means working on the right type of tasks and in the right order. Okay, so you need to always have a big picture of what you're trying to achieve, a plan on a roadmap. So it's easily to get lost in a daily grind or in the daily grind of trying to achieve something without a plan that you can reference to and see that big picture. So I can tell you that I made many mistakes on my farm in the beginning when I was, just trying to do random things that I saw on the internet. Okay, so I was inspired as everyone we like food forest, and then I went immediately to nursery and I bought a tree, and then I kind of looked. Okay, so I could plan it. I could plant the tree in this area. So, and then the next row would be 5 meters away, and then I went and I simply planted the tree. And today I call that tree a control tree because it's not growing at all. So I skipped so many steps before when you come down to planting. So you need to first have an idea of what's your overall layout of the food forest, and then do what type of soil are you planting into? Do you need to do any soil improvement? And then what's the water management strategy? And then you come to planting. Okay, so I skipped so many parts and steps, so many important steps, and I came directly into planting. So that's why I say that for each project that you are working, and the project can be your food forest, that's your system that you're trying to establish, implement, and then later on maintain. For each of that project, you can split it into design phase, implementation phase, and then maintenance phase. And then that maintenance phase will have, design, implementation, maintenance phase, they'll have certain steps within them, and you organize them in order. So for example, for a food forest in a design phase, you would have, of course, that's a planning. You would plan the food forest, you would define a layout, you will see what kind of plants you need to source and get and what you would like to grow. And then you have a site preparation works. When you come into the implementation, you have site preparation works where you perhaps do some site clearing and then test the soil and do a site survey. And then you get The next phase would be initial soil works, where you start to move earth and dig swales or do some drainage work. After that, you would have soil conditioning works, where you come into the phase where you improve the soil in some way, and then you come to planting. After you plant, there is a maintenance phase. So for each person who is trying to implement a food forest, you will need to figure out what are the steps and create that plan for yourself, that plan should be relevant to the context you are operating within. Okay, so it would be different for someone in a boreal climate than someone in Mediterranean climate, for example. Okay, so, and the tool that I'm recommending for people to use for this could be a simple spreadsheet table. And just for your listeners, I prepared a document where I'll list all the project management tools that they can use when they are organizing stuff on their properties. And I'll have that on my website under permaculturepractice.com/Oliver, and we'll put the link in the description. Okay. But the easiest tool where you can create this would be like a spreadsheet. You create columns and you define what your plan with stages is for establishing and maintaining your food forest. As I said, there would be certain phases, and within those phases, certain steps. So this would then outline what you need to do. Okay, so the next would be when you need to do it. So is there anything to address here, Oliver, or we can move to when?
Yeah, there's some really good points in there. It's so easy to get overwhelmed by the amount of information out there. I mean, I've read books and books on food forests. If we're going to continue with this example, there's so many minute techniques that are exciting and inspiring, like grafting and seed saving and all these things, but are not relevant at the beginning stages when you need to gather, let's say, baseline data, do soil assessments, perhaps create a design, think through the evolution and maintenance, right? It's very easy to get caught up in those details. And though I've definitely skipped steps and done things a little bit too fast, oftentimes my difficulty is overthinking, where I've thought through so many little details that I lose sight of the bigger picture. And this is what I like about your framework, is that it allows for the input of those details while still maintaining a vision of the timeline, the bigger picture that you can see at a glance from a little further back. I was going to ask about, how do you organize this in a visual way? It's one of the tools that really helps me, but you were mentioning the spreadsheet. I use those a lot as well. And yeah, like you said, we'll put the link in the description for people who can use this as a template to work with. So, okay, so we've got a bit of a framework now. We've started to put things in something of an order. Moving on from the what is the next stage? What is the next, planning aspect that we need to consider?
Okay, so we come to when. Okay, so first we have the what, the things, what are we going to work on and in what order? And then we come to the when. When is all about being on schedule, doing tasks at the right time. So anything related to farming is usually seasonal, and you need to do things at the right time. So you don't want to miss the window and then have to wait for the next year, or do things at the wrong time of the year and then waste your resources. For simple examples could be adding fertilizer, adding nitrogen-based fertilizer in midwinter. Okay, so if you do that, then all the nitrogen fertilizer will basically evaporate before plants actually need them in spring. Or it could be pruning an apple tree in midsummer, or doing earthworks in the driest part of the year. So I can tell you an example of me doing things at the wrong time of the year, and people could relate to that, but it clearly illustrates. So I was in my food forest, I have my canopy trees, I have my shrubs, and now I'm working on herbaceous perennial layer. And one of the most talked about plants for that layer is comfrey. Okay, so comfrey is a dynamic accumulator, and I was trying to get comfrey cuttings, root cuttings, because it propagates so easily from root cuttings. I was trying to propagate comfrey. And so I knew from my daily walks, I walked to the field that we have close by, and I could see comfrey growing. So I was constantly eyeing the comfrey, so how I'm going to dig it out. And at the very end of the summer, or a bit earlier, I came with my shovel, I picked up comfrey, I made, I don't know, 200 root cuttings, and then I went to my food forest and I planted all those root cuttings. So all those tasks kind of, I think, took me, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours of work. Okay, so, and I have daily, not daily, but I have limited hours. Okay, and nothing grew. Nothing grew because what I did, I took comfrey root cuttings at the wrong time of the year. Okay, so I should have taken the cuttings at the late fall or early spring, when the root of the comfrey accumulated enough energy to regrow from the root cuttings. So I wasted all that time. I wasted all that money and potentially money and time, and I did nothing, and I got nothing in return. So once I realized my mistake, I made a simple calendar where I just put, its plant propagation calendar, where I put like I established what the timeline is, when to take the root cuttings, and that comes, and that's like a simple example why you need to create a calendar of events, for example, for your plant propagation needs or for the food forest. Or so that calendar then shows you month by month when the tasks are happening from that initial plan that you're planning the what. You can have your what plan for the plant propagation as well. As I said, there are multiple systems. You break your whole farm into different subsystems, and you manage each system with the projects with certain steps, and then you have the calendar which tells you when the things are happening. So for a food forest that we are following before, in, let's say, January, you would know that in January you could, if in my continental climate, you could plant in January, February, you can plant bare root trees. You can also do food forest planning, your design. Then in the early spring, you start with, you can start adding the fertilizers and soil amendments. You can do sheet mulching. If, for example, then in, let's say, March, just prior to spring and the rains, you can start your earthworks. You mark down on your calendar where each of the things that you outline in your roadmap are happening across the year, so you know exactly where you can refer to as you're doing stuff, as you're planning. Okay, so for this, I also use a spreadsheet, and I created, like, each column is 1 month, and then similar to timeline softwares, if any of your listeners, and if you know, like a timeline software would be something like a Gantt chart, but it will map across when the certain task is happening across the whole year. Okay, and there are timeline softwares, and I'll have that in my document also outlined there with some summary and instructions on how to use them.
Nice.
So
this super useful. Yeah.
So this outlines, what to do and when. Okay, so
are all of these different timelines already put into the templates that you've created, or is this something that someone would have to do research to figure out when the times are? Because I'm just thinking, like, from our perspective, you and I can have quite a bit of experience with this. We've built a lot of knowledge over the years about when the priority tasks need to happen. And like you just described, the timing on those is essential because they can be entirely useless if you do them at the wrong time of the year. But what about somebody with, let's say, just an introductory knowledge to this stuff? Maybe they're not sure what to prioritize, or even all of the steps that are required to get to the success and the goals that they want. much less the timeline that they would need to put this in. How do you go about figuring that out?
Well, I do this for a living, so it's my job to pursue things like that and find them. And I'm pretty organized when it comes to capturing what I find online and then translating that into something that's usable, like distilling everything into materials like that. So, unfortunately, I'm not sure if that's unfortunately, but for someone who likes to learn, you would need to gather all that data ideally from somebody who is local. Okay, so I researched from multiple books, videos, and everything, and I have a system where I just so this is relevant. I'm collecting this and I'm putting this into here, and then I can use it later. But for example, there are, for calendars, there's calendars a bit easier to find because a lot of agriculture extensions would have calendars that you can refer to, but they are kind of highly specific for the area. In the downloads, I'll give templates and I'll give resources on where you can find those tools that will help you manage, but they'll be just templates. If somebody, if people are interested, I have courses that where I've already done the work for people, and that was a bit challenging to do because there are so many climates across the world. So there are when I'm giving people calendars, then there are like 6 or 7 different calendars for each hemispheres and for different climates. But essentially, if you want to create a calendar for yourself, there is some research you have to do, and that's why I say you take it a bit how to say slower, in a sense that you focus on one system and then try to collect all the information that you can and then expand from there.
That's always good advice. Start with something that's small and manageable if you're new, and use the learnings that you get from the inevitable mistakes that you're going to make, and embrace those as part of the learning journey, and use those learnings to refine your systems and make them better for next time.
Yeah, but the important thing would be have a system for management. Absolutely. Like if there is one message that I can convey to your listeners, have a system organized where you can collect information, where you can refer to that information later on. And because a lot of time is like, if you don't have a system for managing, then you are kind of running around like a headless chicken from one task to another. You don't know what you're working on, where it fits, and then doing things incorrectly at the wrong time of the year, and then your progress suffers. But basically, that's the thing that we don't talk about enough, is how are people managing their farms at the back end. Like for example, when you look at Richard Perkins, he's like a superhuman. He in 7 years he established a farm and wrote 3 books and had 1,000 people on his going through his internship, and so that's all very impressive. But how does he manages all that at the back end? That's kind of what's really interesting for me. I'm not sure how he does it, but I'm certain that he has some kind of system and frameworks and workflows and everything. So that's what allows you to essentially save time, and of course he invested a lot of time. Okay, so it's not like I have essentially 2, 3, 4 hours max for my farm, given that I'm doing the online stuff. I could do more, but that's what I said about work-life choices. I deliberately choose to spend as much time as I can with my family, and I could be working outside, but that's how I choose, at least at this phase of my life.
And that's important. Like, these types of systems are highly customizable, not only for the context that you're working within, but also for your own unique goals. If you're not trying to optimize for high productivity and maximum yield, which is probably not relevant for a lot of your homesteaders the way it might be for someone who's living off of the agriculture production, you get to choose what it is you're optimizing for. and what you do with the time that is saved from being more organized and more focused on the time that you're giving to these other tasks.
Yeah. So there is a one project management software, and I'll put it in the list, which whole selling point is save 1 day per week. In a sense of you are so organized and on top of things that you essentially save that 1 day of 7 or whatever 8 hours of doing some kind of unproductive work, and then you get to do with that time as you wish. Okay, you can invest that time in something else, or you can spend more time with your family. Okay, yeah. So
exactly. So okay, so we've got our plan developing now. We've got the what, we've figured out the when, as we've divided things up into a calendar. How are we actually going to implement this? How is this going to play out when we get on the ground?
Okay, so as I said, it's a trident, and the first is the what, then is the when, and finally is the how. So how is all about being efficient and doing your task and whichever you're working on in the correct way. So you can do a lot of things at the right time. You can do a lot of right things in the right order at the right time and still do a poor job. So for example, as I was mentioning that tree, probably I planted that control tree that I was talking about earlier wrong. Okay, so I didn't have the insights that I have today. So you can take your tree and do everything correctly, and then you plant a tree too deep. You bury the graft union, or you don't. You put the fertilizer in the hole instead of putting it on the top, and then you wait for a year or two, and then you realize that the tree is not growing properly. You've done things wrong. Okay, so that's why I said you can still know exactly when and what and do poor job. So for this step, for the how, you want to create a step-by-step guides or workflows or protocols, whatever you call it, you can follow when you are executing. So ideally, the guides would have instructions on what you need to do step by step, and additionally give you some ideas about how much time it will take you, the task, what tools and resources and equipment you need, so you can organize yourself and waste no time. Okay, so the idea is to have something you can easily refer to. You don't have to create guides you don't have to create your own guides. I do, because that's what I do for a living. But at least you would need to have some notebook or some place where you can save whatever you find online. You still find thousands of articles that are really relevant for what you're trying to do. For example, planting a tree. You can go to WikiHow to see how that guide would look like. Even WikiHow has how to plant a tree. Okay, so that's how you would the guide would look like. You don't have to do it yourself, but you would need to have some place where you're saving it, where you can easily access. And I can tell you that when I was starting with my farm and in the early establishment, there are so many times when I was doing something on the site, and in that moment I was browsing the web on how to do it. Okay, multiple times. Like when I was planting a tree, I would okay, so how deep should I plant a tree? And how deep to plant a tree in a Google. Okay, and when I was pruning, how to prune a currant shrub. So the idea is that you have something that you can easily refer to instead of just browsing the web. Okay, so and additionally, you would need to have some kind of notebook where you can note your progress, your failures, specific numbers like volumes of fertilizer that you're using or amount of fertilizer you're using, observations, and simply noting how much time it takes you to do a task. So on my farm, I actually time everything. So how much does it take me to plant a tree? How much does it take me to mow my cover crop between the rows? So when I'm planning next time on doing something the next year, when the recurring task happens again, then I know exactly how much time it will take me. And I know if I have limited 4 hours on my farm, that 1 hour is going to be that, and then I have 3 hours to do something else. Okay, so, and I do this. You can do this. You can have these guides in Google Docs. You can have them saved into your Evernote, into Notion, into whatever you're using, just to have them easily accessible, whether that's on your laptop or as you're doing stuff on the site.
Yeah, all of these different tools available now make it really easy, especially if you're pretty adept in the digital space. I mean, there's stuff that's extremely focused for exactly the type of organization, task management that you're doing. You can organize, like you said, the list of all of the times that it takes for the different tasks that correspond with them. But, also like you mentioned, having a system is the first thing. Much like they say in the diet and nutrition world, the efficacy of the diet that you choose is only as good as how long you stick with it. You can build up this wonderful system, but if it's complex and you end up never using it, it's actually not as effective as a much simpler and more basic one that you stick with regularly. This is a long-term, aspect that you need to integrate in to see the benefits over time. It's like meditation or any of these other practices. You're not going to see it really impart its benefits right away.
Yeah,
but it's in the reflection, it's in the development and the refinement of these tools and these processes that's really going to make it relevant for you and your life, as well as the different tasks or goals that you've built up through it, right?
Yeah. Well, in the beginning, I had no system. And then I had my little notebook where I would handwrite everything that I was doing and what it took me, and then eventually moved to digital tools. And I can tell that like project management is even I was so much aware, and I was trying to do all these things in spreadsheets, but there are kind of easy tools that you can use today, and it doesn't really takes you much to learn, because we're all accustomed to using if you ever used spreadsheets, Microsoft, Suite and stuff like that, you know how to use them, and they don't have to be complicated, and you can do things with the old good handwritten notes as well, and have notebooks and print stuff for yourself as well. Well, what I'm trying to say that is you can always wing it and try to do, and I would say in a lot of cases you can do it. It's also similar, like how in permaculture, some people like to plan in details, minute details, when they are kind of creating their design, and some people like sepulture, they don't do anything. They just come to the site and then they plan, in their head. Whatever works is fine, just as long as kind of you are organized. If whatever you're trying to manage, you can benefit from being much more organized. And that's what I'm trying to do in my life. It's some kind of I was forced to do, because I realized that I don't have that much time, and the only way I can get more time is by using being more efficient with what I got. So hence why I created all these tools.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I'm in the same state of reflection right now, which is why I was excited to do this interview and this conversation, because I'm revisiting a lot of my own systems, many of which have been working quite well in different areas, but a lot of new complexity has come into my life by moving out here, having my family visit over the summer, and wanting to spend as much time as possible with my nieces and my sister while they're around, trying to be the educator of jungle school for them, so that they get some educational or some environmental education before they go back to the city. And yeah, all of these complexities continue to arise. And in this reflection and refinement of my own processes, I was looking at all of the different breakdowns that you have and seeing how useful it could be, especially as I'm looking at these longer term visions, such as the maintenance of this ecosystem, which has not been as important for me when I'm mostly coaching other clients, because though I am involved in seeing the iterations and the maintenance that comes out over time, I'm not there on the ground day to day needing to organize my own tasks with the type of precision that I now need to do for this place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what do you use? Just out of curiosity, do you use like spreadsheets, or what do you use? Handwritten notes? How do you organize yourself?
The thing is, I use a bit of everything.
Yeah.
I tend to try and do as much analog as possible.
Yeah.
I would prefer not to need to refer to screens or my phone when I'm out.
I know.
I really like. I've got a daily planner, just like I did when I was
Yeah.
younger and in school, and I
Yeah.
take a lot of written notes down in there. I would really like to start to integrate in a daily journal or some kind of note taking that is archived in the proper
Yeah.
categories. I've done that previously, but it's just one of those things that's been hard to maintain as things change in my life. But I recognize how valuable that can be, especially for reflection in
Yeah.
future seasons and going back to see what was happening at a certain time of this year. And I mean, you just can't hold it all in your head, right? I mean,
Yeah.
a big part of having these digital tools is outsourcing a lot of your mental capacity and your memory that is just unrealistic to hold in your mind alone. So right now I'm struggling with integrating the paper and analog tools with the digital ones and
Yeah.
still making sure that they're accessible when I would prefer not to be using screens and all of the distractions that come with those tools as well.
Yeah. Well, what I actually found is that I create like a project management plan, and then I operate on a daily basis as much as you are like with the daily planner. Okay, so
Yeah.
I operate as long as I have that big picture view of what needs to happen, then I break down that into daily tasks. And that's how, and my daily tasks are written on my whiteboard. Okay, so I also use a combination, but I found really useful. For example, I was yesterday I kind of got like 10 minutes, and then I went into my project management tool that I'm using, ClickUp. And I went and see, okay, so let me see what projects are in progress on my farm. And one of the projects was to add mycorrhizal fungi, because now it's spring and it's the right time to do it. And then I realized, okay, I forgot to order, the inoculant. And then I went and I ordered inoculant because it was on top of on the top of my mind. But otherwise, I would forget completely. And I do tend, before I was trying to organize myself in a better way, those type of things would completely slip. And then I would come to my farm, and then I would realize, shit, I forgot to order the inoculant. So what I realized is that that big picture, project management thing, having that, okay, so here's what's in progress, that keeps me, I don't have to think about it anymore. And then I organize my daily tasks based on that. Mm-hmm. I could easily perhaps do it with a pen and paper, but I found this much easier for me, because I refer it on my phone and on my desktop computer, and as I'm doing stuff as I'm digging holes and as I'm doing something, I'm referring to it on my phone.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Like, for the bigger, more complex planning, I definitely use digital tools for that. Spreadsheets. We use ClickUp a lot with climate farmers in the company.
Yeah.
To organize projects. We've used other ones in the past, as well as integrations with communication software and stuff. For me, having them too spread out on a lot of digital tools, especially those that don't speak with one another, can be really disorienting, and actually ends up being more of a problem because you can't remember which one you actually put it in. When I'm often coming up with ideas or in a creative process, I like to use pen and paper. I don't know. I think it's a lack of distractions that allows me to focus a lot better than having notifications come up or some sort of ping for a chat. Yeah.
Yeah. What I found is that I always carry my little notebook and a pen on my person all the time, because I always get inspired. I always make some observation that I want to write down. And the ideas are also important because I always think, oh, I'll remember that later. I never remember that later. If I have some good idea, regarding anything, like doing a guide or observing something, or I might remember, but I don't remember.
Sure.
Because there are so many things. Yeah.
And so in the creation of your first systems, all the way up to this quite refined system that you're now teaching, what have been some of your biggest learnings in what is effective to you that helps you to not only do your tasks when and in the right way that they need to be executed, but also where you pay attention to these tools like we're talking about, what ends up in the foreground and what maybe is easy to forget that needs reminding? I guess that's a loaded question. There's a lot of questions within.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to get to is like, what has been your learning process and the refinement of your system?
Well, the learning process was that like the biggest change was from me trying to keep everything in my head to having some sort of way to organize myself. In the beginning, I was just simply using spreadsheets and a notebook, and that was like going from managing everything in my head to that was I don't know, 1,000% more effective than as soon as you, let's say in the beginning, if you're trying to do one project, then it's easily to get everything in order and have an overview of what's happening. But as soon as you start to have multiple projects going, then you start to get lost in everything that has to be done. So as the complexity increases, then you increasingly have to have something to have a big overview of what's happening. And for example, in the beginning, I was just for my simple garden. The garden, as I establish a garden and as it become more and more complex, it's simple to get lost into the details of, okay, I need to plant my leek here and forget that there are like so many other things that you are kind of still managing, and still have to do. And that's just a garden. And I'm not talking about the food forest and other systems that.
So what are the things that you find most difficult to manage through this system? Are there any categories of things, maybe family time or creative tasks? Or, I mean, for me personally, the ones that always slip away are day-to-day maintenance within the house, like cooking and cleaning. It seems like something I'm just going to do because I have to, but then at the end of planning everything, it's the one thing that didn't get planned for and it starts to accumulate. Do you have anything like that?
No, but well, I have something that it's more like a mental, like in a sense that expectation. I always find myself readjusting my expectations because I have like big goals, and then because of lack of time, I don't get to do something, and then I have to manage and lower my expectations. And that's kind of the, let's say, a life hack, so you are not feeling overwhelmed with everything that you need to do, because things will eventually, no matter how good are you in organizing stuff, you'll always have, especially if you are kind of very motivated and want to do a lot of things, you'll have a lot of things that you want to get to. And then the most important thing is managing that expectations, in a sense that you're not hard on yourself, not fulfilling what you wanted. But you can at the end of the day, it's all about the lifestyle. I can talk about the projects and management and being effective and efficient, but it all comes down to the lifestyle that you wanna live. It doesn't matter if you are working, I don't know, 16 hours a day if your family life suffers. At the end of the day, I think that the most important stuff in life is the relationship you have with your people around you, Nothing is no farm, not anything that you achieve will make you happier than being with people around. And that's kind of what I say is the managing expectation part. Because if you can't achieve something, then it's easy to reframe it as it's not a big deal. And I can, rather than be, again, overwhelmed or be mad on yourself that you're not achieving, and constantly looking at how others are doing stuff and you are not doing. So comparing yourself with progress of others. So managing expectation would be like the biggest thing, I would say, in all of this.
And within, I guess, this process, is it planned in already to do the reflection, the observation of the outcomes of the things that you actually accomplished? How does that inform the replanning and the refinement of the system over time?
That's an excellent question. Excellent question. A lot of things are recurring. I would say a lot of things are recurring when you're doing, like, if you have install tasks or the install part of something, you'll probably do something and then it's done, but you'll have the experience and your notes and whatever, and that can inform the next thing when you're doing. That's the daily journal part that you were talking about. That observation part, that's really important to have your experiences in Britain. But also you have, if you finish a task, then the task is never kind of forgotten. It's kind of in your archive where you can always think about what went wrong, what didn't. So in that sense, you kind of always inform your whatever you're doing by your past experience. Whether that's you put it in written, whether that's just experiential, whatever you do, it's always the permaculture, design process. You have your goals, you have the site assessment, then you have the implementation, and then you have the maintenance monitoring, and then that feedback loop goes again. That's kind of always kind of the framework when you're doing this kind of things.
Yeah, for sure. So how do you go about teaching this? Tell me a little bit about the course and the process that you guide people through to customize their own systems based on the templates that you've made available.
Actually, what I'm always trying to do is, my biggest thing with my courses is to make everything as plug and play as possible. We don't have time. Other people don't have time. They don't want, they want something like ideally in a world that we are going forward to. And that's going to be increasingly the artificial intelligence world. Who knows what's going to happen? But currently I have things, for example, in my course, permaculture implementation course, I'm using certain tools that enable people to customize their plan to their situation. And that could be, so if I was talking about the what or when and how, so what would be your roadmap? And in my course, I help people in an easy way to create a plan, a roadmap that is highly customized, personalized, by answering a few questions, and then the system would tell them, okay, so here is your plan for this year, and then they can refer to a calendar which is for their climate. So I think there are like six different climates that I cover, and then of course there is northern and southern hemisphere, and the step-by-step guides, they are universally applicable. Usually, it's more about like step-by-step guide. You could think about it. It's a technique, and then the when tells you how to contextualize the technique to your context, your climate, and the what helps you to have that big picture, like the roadmap would be personalized. That's what I'm trying to do with my courses, to have things as plug and play as possible. I'm assuming, as I said, that things might change in the future quite radically with everything that AI is, like growing. In the last 6 months, there was no AI. Now the AI is unfortunately kind of conquering humans in a year, as much as I was listening. In a 5 years, who knows what will happen. So
Yeah.
but but it's all about making everything plug and play. I really, to be honest, I enrolled in many courses which just have like video lessons and might have some resources, but what I'm trying to achieve is it would be like your companion that, if you are doing implementation, that kind of does all the work for you. Okay, so it gives you the plan that you need to follow, tells you when you need to follow it, when you need to do it, and then it gives you the guides that you can access on your phone if you wish. And all done basically on my experience, as I really, I would really, it would be really useful if I had a calendar. It would be really useful if I know what things need to happen exactly and in what step. And it would be useful to have guides that I can use as I'm doing stuff on the side. So that's why I created the course that I mentioned.
I love this, and maybe something to explore there with the emergence of AI, like you had mentioned, and the role that these different systems can play. Is one thing that I've observed is that a lot of these systems are more or less mimicking algorithms, right? You plug in a certain amount of information, you get a result, you get a playbook, right? And I think this is why a lot of people have excitement about AI's role in even complex systems like homestead or farm.
I think
because you can get to very predictable results and templates that you can then use in your management strategy. But I think for the same reason that you sounded apprehensive in the way that you mentioned that, and my own apprehensions have come from, is that it doesn't replace the relationship that you need to build and constantly be observing and receiving feedback from with the living beings and the land that you are managing, right? So these tools, these digital resources can function as a real shortcut to the learning journey and the organization required for effective and efficient management, but they're not a replacement for the nuance that's created in the relationships that must be formed between living beings to create a reverence, a respect, and a stewardship that I am yet to see any machine come close to being able to replicate. How do you see that?
To be honest, I'm a little bit concerned about the AI progress that we are seeing. Like, it's not directly related to your question, but I actually, I've been listening a lot about, and I'm really excited. I'm using AI tools, and AI tools that are getting implemented in everything that we are going to use. And it's going to be so, they say that it's going to increase the productivity and whatnot, but I increasingly see the future where things like that actually disrupt things that we are trying to do and achieve. I'm especially afraid of a day when AI is going to be so much advanced that he and she, or whatever, however you want to call it, comes up with the solutions of giving us limitless energy, if something like that can happen, if it's so smart, because then we can forget about anything trying to related to keeping Earth as, restoring Earth, regenerating Earth, because we'll have so much energy. So I see more like looking forward. I'm very excited about what's happening with AI and tools that we will be able to use. But at the same time, I'm not sure if afraid is the right type of word, but I wouldn't like to see technology so much implemented into mainstream agriculture, because it's going to be more detrimental than the current trajectory we are on. Like, regenerative agriculture is picking up, like it's starting to be mainstream. But if we get that integration with technology and more efficiency and cheaper energy or whatever, then I think that things are not going to end up well, at least for Earth.
Yeah, Yeah, and there's definitely those concerns that I have too. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out and how these tools are used, right? The tool is
Yeah,
it is its own thing. It's how it's used that really determines, the opinion that we have of it and how it develops. I also am concerned too that there's this perception that we can replace human presence in landscapes with optimized AI tools and better, let's say, monitoring devices or technology
yeah,
to do different tasks,
yeah,
because it carries with it the assumption that these are tasks of drudgery that need to be avoided at all
yeah,
costs. And
yeah,
that should only ever try to be outsourced to something that is maybe optimized for doing that and doesn't complain about the working conditions that people are otherwise given. And I feel like that's a really sad assumption that far too many people have bought into, that these tasks are only the task themselves, right? Like, let's say,
yeah,
going and pruning a vineyard or
yeah,
doing soil amendments. These things that are repetitive and, yeah, maybe
mm,
not super engaging, but they miss the relationship aspect that is built from these. And especially when you have mixed farm, like, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? When we reduce these tasks down to just the actions of doing them, and then optimize our farm landscapes for only those simplified tasks, which can then be optimized by machines,
yeah,
then of course it doesn't make sense to have a mixed farm with all kinds of cyclical dynamics and reinforcing relationships between living systems.
yeah,
And now you're in an ecosystem where everything is reduced to those simple tasks and relationship is not possible because there's no complexity in it anymore. And that is increasingly what is looked at as farming as simply a production method over a unit of space.
mm,
And it's unfortunate that there are so many, let's say, factors and variables in our ecology and in our climates that make it difficult to predict or manipulate or control a desired outcome for production results, rather than seeing those bugs as the features that have resulted in the diversity of cultures and languages and ultimately the enrichment of ourselves as a species, of which production is only, in my opinion, a symptom of all of
yeah,
these other benefits from reconnecting with the ecology that we participate in. And so, if AI, as complex and intelligent as it may develop into, still reduces or, let's say, makes redundant that cultural stewardship and relationship aspect of interacting with our environments, well, we're already down that path, and I don't see it moving in a positive direction.
yeah. It's going to be just more efficiency, like in the mainstream,
As if that were
agriculture.
the only thing worth optimizing for.
Yeah, of course. Well, I would bet that people who are listening to this and who have their regenerative farms or properties or whatever, they prioritize that relationship with nature as something, that's a
I'm
big
sure.
part of why they're doing it. Okay, because I can tell you, working, growing veggies is not just growing veggies. It's about so many things. Being able to provide for a family, working physically that gives you that health, eating healthy, being part of that ecosystem, doing something good. That's all kind of things, except having that production of veggies that are you can't quantify those, and they are a big part of why we are doing it and the human experience at all.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, and the
so
internal development that is innate in those processes, right? Learning
yeah,
patience, observation,
yeah,
and like a selfless sense of caring for not only the individual plants themselves, but the environment that makes their health possible. It gets,
yeah,
yeah, and I'm really worried that, especially with the very, very low percentage of the human population that's currently involved in agriculture or land stewardship, that this is something that is just being bred out of our cultures and is not necessarily going to return on its own or through some sort of manufactured incentives to revive it. Right? These are
yeah.
aspects of our culture and our learned history that I don't know how long it would take to reestablish if they were really lost.
Yeah, well, the thing is, we are going in that direction where I think that the best thing it can happen is that we don't find that new energy source that is going to give us limitless growth. Even the transition to renewables would be not give us that type of energy form where we can grow if we can kind of keep the destruction of Earth at this level, and it will be good. I don't want to move into the next phase, which is going to be much more efficient at destroying what we have. Yeah. But potentially, maybe it's going to be much more easier to restore with new developments. We'll see.
Yeah. Man, we took kind of a philosophical turn here at the end. Let's go back to the main point, which is that, despite the overuse and simplification of many systems that are used to manage ecosystems, I cannot advocate enough for building systems and organizational structures within your own planning and goal orientation, whatever project that it is that you're working with, while still maintaining the humanity and the stewardship connection with the land that so many of us get into this for and that fall in love with it because of.
Well, the thing is, the why of what you're doing is always the most important. Like I enjoy creating this stuff and doing this stuff, but my why is that I enjoy, my lifestyle, my family. It's all about geared on just being more effective the time I have, so that I produce what I need and enjoy my life.
Well, look, man, I really appreciate you putting together these resources and making them available to so many people. I myself am really, already have started to look through the templates that you've shared with me, and they've already started to inform my own reiteration of my own systems as I'm revising them at the moment. So I really appreciate that. I really encourage people to check out the links that I'll post in the show notes for this and explore and improve the systems that you have for your own work as well. Thanks again, Phil, for making time. I'll make sure that it's not another 5 years before we connect on the show again.
Thanks.
And I wish you all the best with you and your family at home.
Okay, thanks, Oliver.
Thanks again to William. Just remember that the links to all of his exclusive tools and templates are available directly through the links in the show notes for this episode, and you can sign up for this new course at thepermacultureapprentice.com. Now, before we wrap this up, just remember that these episodes are only the beginning of the learning resources, design and coaching services, in-person courses, and interactive community that are available through Regenerative Skills. The Discord server is our free community where you can connect with other like-minded listeners, exchange ideas, stories, tips, and resources, as well as interact with me directly and quite a few former guests from this show. Our Instagram account @regen_skills is the best place to see the projects that me and the team are working on, both for clients and collaborators, as well as on our own properties. I'll also be announcing the certification courses, workshops, and gatherings that we've got coming up later this year. If you're interested in getting dedicated support for your own project, you can now schedule a free planning session with one of our team members through the request form on our website. You can also find all the links, show notes, and past resources there at regenerativeskills.com. We truly believe that no matter your experience, your knowledge, abilities, resources, or background, you can be a powerful force for regeneration on this planet, and we're here to help you find your path. So as always, remember to keep taking those little steps every day towards a regenerative future, and I'll be right by your side along the way.